Hi DJ Tech Tools. Today I've got a really valuable set of tips and tricks for everybody. This is good for beginners, advanced DJs, Serato DJs, Tractor DJs, CDJ DJs, everybody should get some value out of this video. In the beginning, we're gonna cover some basic stuff that'll get everyone onto the same page. So you advanced viewers out there, just stick with me until the midway end, where I've got some really juicy tips, including a personal trick of mine that I love and I'm sharing for the very first time in this video. Today's topic is creating space in your mix for new tracks. If you look over here, I've got a set of glasses that kind of represent the audio spectrum. If we think of this glass as the full potential of the audio spectrum, we understand that there's a limit and there's only so much that can be filled into an audio spectrum. And if we think of each of these glasses as a song, so the paper in this case is the song, it's completely full. And this is usually the case. Most DJs and most mastering engineers are going to completely fill the audio spectrum with a song. So if we're going to mix two songs together into the remaining audio spectrum, the output of our mixer, or in most cases the recording that we're then going to put on SoundCloud, how in the world do we fit two cups that are already full into one cup that's empty? Well, if we take the songs out and fill it in, what Tractor and some DJ software does is compresses that material together to fit it into the output. So that's what happens, is that you get some crazy compression, which sometimes can be good, sometimes it can be desirable, and sometimes it can be undesirable. So ideally what we'd want to do as DJs, because this is our job, is to create more natural room for these new songs through a variety of tools that I'm going to show you today. First, for some context, I've got some meters running here in the upper half of the screen. Now, to kind of keep track of ourselves and notice how well we're doing on keeping room, we are going to look at these meters and hopefully we never see red. If we start to see red, we know that we're starting to see compression, and that's what we're going to try to avoid in today's video. Now, obviously, I'm the king of the red. I'm always hitting the red really hard, and sometimes I even use compression to my benefit because it creates some really interesting side effects and audio characteristics that I like. However, in today's video, we're going to try to really create space for these songs and dynamically make room without modifying the original tracks too much. So the first and most basic thing we can do is obviously to pick a section of the new song that we're playing that has a lot of space. So on the right-hand side, I've got a new track. Here's the new track, which doesn't have much of a beat. It's just got a nice intro. So when I put these two together, we're hitting the red just a tiny, tiny little bit because they're not fighting for the same space. But if we go to a different part of the track, which has a full beat in it, you'll see that I'm starting to hit the red a little bit more, and there's less room for this new track. So how do we make room for this new track? The most basic, of course, is volume. I just made the most common mistake that a lot of DJs do, which is turn the volume faders up and hit play. Got one track playing, hit play on the other, and where do I go with that? There's nowhere to go. The only thing I can do is turn down the old one, which creates a real sense of energy drop. You know, we know that energy is directly connected to volume, so we don't want to have crazy increases and drops in volume, and yet we also want to create space for these tracks. So the first and most basic thing we can do to make space is to turn one track down while we turn another up. Pretty obvious. I don't really need to demonstrate it. You know what I'm talking about. The second thing we can do to make space is use our EQs. And most of the space in this sonic spectrum is actually in the low end. If you were to see a pie chart of how much each EQ knob takes up in this jar, they're not even. The low EQ knob might take up a whole bunch of that space. So something you'll see a lot of DJs do quite often is drop down the low end of the incoming song and drop out the bass, Maybe they'll do a little bit of a volume mix, and when it's time to really let the new track carry the energy, they'll just switch out the bass, which works effectively. We're not hitting the red. We've made space for this track by completely taking out the low end of the other. Usually that's what people will do, strictly with the low end for the EQs. Another way to do this, and one that I prefer, would be to use the filters. Essentially, the filter is going to do the same thing. We can turn the filter to the right, which is a high-pass filter. Let's hear what that sounds like. And we can slowly take out the low end. So in this case, we probably take out the low end of our new song, slowly remove some of the low end of an old one, and drop the low end of a new one in. But you notice I'm still kind of stuck. I have nowhere to go from here. The only thing I can do is kind of bring the volume down, which creates a real noticeable drop in energy. So how do I address that? Well, what we want to do there is create more dynamic space adjustments, or creating more space dynamically, so that as one song is allowing space, the other song is filling it. So less of, this action and more of this action, where they're gradually sort of replacing each other and filling the space that we're taking away. That could be done with EQs, that could be done with filters, or that could be done with volumes. So those are the three most common basic ways to create space. Now let's go to a few more advanced techniques. Now, the effects are normally thought of as things that you would add on top of a mix, but they can also be used as really helpful mixing tools. One that I love in particular is Reverb, because Reverb is sort of three tools built in one. It's kind of an EQ, because as you add reverb, it takes a little bit of the low end out. It's kind of a volume, because as you add reverb, it brings the volume down of that track. And it's also an interesting space creator, where it tends to sort of move the song to the sides. Let's hear how that sounds on our old song, or the song that we're mixing out of. Let's put some reverb on there. You'll hear the low end we start to lose some of that low end. And along with the sound of the room, the track's actually getting a little bit of a widening effect, which will create space for something to come inside of it. And I can create more reverb to push it out even more. I really want to be tricky, I might even use the freeze at the end. And we're into the new track. And that felt a little bit more dynamic. Instead of just taking something away and then bringing something in, creating these uncanny or uncomfortable valleys of energy, I was replacing as I was taking away in even amounts. And the reverb's really powerful for that. I used the reverb freeze at the end to sort of aid the transition, create a lot of space, but have a little bit of tail from the end so it wasn't so abrupt. And that brings me to my next technique for creating a lot of space, would be using the delay and the delay freeze function, which we've covered in many, many of our videos, but I'll just show it to you very, very quickly. Similar concept, I'd probably use a little bit of a volume mix here. A little bit of a volume mix. I might add a little bit of delay, maybe a little filter, and then I'm going to hit the freeze at the downbeat. So I still have a character of the old song, but it's a really thin character. I've taken out probably 80% of the volume from that track and left a lot of room for the new track that's coming in. So that's the echo freeze, which is found on the delay in Tractor, and also a lot of delays in Ableton, and additionally Serato. You don't have anything like that on any of the Pioneer mixers, but you can get the same effect by turning on a echo post fader and then bringing the fader down, which will create sort of an echo trail after you bring the song out, for those of you mixing on Pioneer gear. Okay, last but not least, probably the gem of them all, the Big Daddy combo of all these tools, and my single favorite, the trick of the day, is to use a bipole filter effect. And that's for a very specific reason. I'm going to use the Filter 92 here, which is a model of the Zone 92 mixer. And the Zone 92 mixer had a great filter that DJs love, that would either do a high pass or a low pass, sounded really, really rich. But this effect inside of Tractor allows you to do both at the same time. So just one more time, well, let's actually listen to it here. Let's get that beat going. Let's turn on the filter, turn it all the way up. Here is the high pass, and here's the low pass. Now the cool thing is that with this filter I obviously have both in one, whereas normally on the filter on the channel I could only do one or the other. But in fact I want to do both at the same time. Not only carving out space from the low end where I need that energy, but also space from the high end to make room for the new hi-hats that are coming in. So with this filter what I'll typically do is I'll take a little bit of the low end out, a little bit of the high end out, and then slowly increase the wet dry, doing kind of this sonic shaping where the whole track is getting not compressed, but just carved down into a little bitty ball that makes a lot of room for the incoming track. And I'll slowly increase that wet dry as I bring up the volume of the second track, making for that dynamic transition. The final thing that I love about this filter so much is that it also has a resonance feature here. And this resonance is designed so that you really hear the filter. But if you turn the resonance to the left, it essentially acts as a volume reduction. You hear that. So this is resonance at 0, and here's resonance to the left. You'll hear it actually brings down the volume of the track. So what I'll do again is I'll have the low end carved out, the high end carved out. I'll have the resonance a little bit to the left. And now as I bring in that effect, it's not only carving out the high parts and the low parts, but it's turning the volume down a little bit. So it's as if I had three hands. I was turning down the volume, turning up the low pass filter and the EQ all at the same time, but I'm doing it with one knob while I'm bringing the other track in. So let's hear what that sounds like for our final transition. It's kind of moving the track into the background as my attention starts to go to the new song. So there you have it, folks. I don't know what that was in the end, 6 or 7, but a lot of good techniques from very basic to more advanced that you can use to create space in your mixes and not jam up the sonic output of your mixer or your mix, so that these tracks have their original characteristics and still are blending really, really smoothly with each other. For more tips, tricks, reviews, and so much more just like this video, make sure to subscribe by clicking the button below or follow us on the web at djtechtools.com.